Hey, Aaron Rabinowitz here for RedGiantTV.com. Recently, some awesome Trapcode work from motion graphics artist, compositor, and designer Owen Street caught our eye, and we asked if he would be willing to break down some of his excellent work. Obviously, he said yes, or this would be the shortest tutorial you ever saw. So, in this episode of Red Giant TV, Owen will break down how he created some of the beautiful and evocative work he did for De Montfort University using Trapcode 3D Stroke as light to help tell the story. One thing to watch out for here is the way in which Owen uses After Effects. He uses a ton of great shortcuts and time-saving techniques that taught me a lot. Take it away, man. Enlighten us.
Hello. I'm going to show you some great techniques I used on some commercials that I worked on in After Effects. Just before we start though, I'd like to explain what direction this tutorial is going to take. First of all, I'd like to discuss some of what went into the pre-production of this piece. Then I'd like to discuss some of the production stage. And finally, I'm really looking forward to showing you what I did in post-production inside After Effects, along with some Trapcode plugins. I hope that this way you can really get a handle not just on how to create some nice effects, but also why those effects were chosen, why they are appropriate, and also other insights into what went into the whole process of creating these sequences. Let's take a look at what we are going to be exploring. And we'll just pause it there for a second. Okay, well I hope you'll agree that that's a nicely shot, dynamic, stylish piece with, I hope, some really nice effects tying the whole thing together. As is usually the case, there is a team of people behind the creation of a great commercial or title sequence or movie SFX shot. So with this in mind, I'd first like to explain some of what went into this piece before I even fired After Effects up. I was asked to work on a series of 6 10-second commercials by a production company called Cromfleet de Libre Productions. The end client for these commercials was the UK-based De Montfort University. Before the shoot took place, the director, Julian Cromfleet, and producer Ed de Libre came in with mood boards and ideas on the kinds of effects they would like to achieve for each of the 6 commercials. We discussed what was possible in After Effects and in CGI, taking into account, of course, the amount of time available to us, which is always a consideration. The idea behind the campaign was definitely going to involve filming exceptional alumni or graduates of the university demonstrating their particular area of expertise. Instead of choosing to show each expert in a real-world situation, the idea was to represent their specialism via special effects. In particular, each individual's area of expertise was to be described in light. Now, we've been watching this example for a while. Let me show you some more examples of the commercials, just to show you what I mean. So in this example, our subject is Philippa Berry, who is Professor of Geomatics, which is all about the gathering of geographic information, and in particular she describes being involved in mapping the Earth, which is why I used Trapcode form to describe the idea of landmass. The effect starts off fairly loosely and then moves along with a gesture of a hand, creating at first a flat surface, which then rises up to create a modulated landscape. This is in order to give the impression of hills and valleys. In this example, a senior research fellow of the university is featured. His name is Parneet Poole, and he is a chartered environmentalist. Now, part of his specialism is in dealing with water systems, and so I used Trapcode Particular to create the idea of fluid flowing behind him. I then used 3D Stroke to create the individual streams, which are generated when he puts his hand into the particular stream. We wanted some interaction between the talent and the effect. Okay, so that's just to give you an overview of the kinds of different approaches that we undertook. But this is the commercial that we're going to be deconstructing a little bit and having a look at how it was built. So in this example, the kinetic energy of Akram Khan's dance moves is being represented by light. I created these light streams in Trapcode 3D Stroke, as I mentioned previously, but there is quite a lot else going on here. So just in case you've already had a look at 3D Stroke and you're thinking, well, that's a relatively simple plugin perhaps, please bear with me here because there's some pretty detailed stuff going on in the background, and I think you'll enjoy seeing how this was put together. So just before we jump into the After Effects project, let's discuss some of the production that went into this. This involved the small matter of the shoot. By saying small matter, I of course mean hugely important. The way things are shot and provided to you affect the way you approach post-production. It can either help or hinder you. Let me just freeze that for a second so we're not confused by this. These commercials needed to be delivered in full HD, by which I mean 1080p, which of course is 1920 by 1080 pixels in dimension. The camera used to shoot these commercials was an ARRI, ARRI D21 camera, which takes prime lenses. Essentially what we're dealing with here is effectively a film camera which delivers digital files. So the footage was actually provided to me on an HD Cam SR digital tape. Now, that's the technical bit. Some of you will be more interested in that than others. Don't worry, there's not too much of that dry stuff in the rest of this tutorial, I promise. When I was in discussion with Aaron Rabinowitz about doing this tutorial, he observed that there appeared to be a lot of physical lighting taking place in this sequence alongside the post-production effects. He is, of course, absolutely right. Specific areas of the talent were lit to indicate areas where the effect would cast light. Now, I'd like to just show you what I mean by that. This is a raw version, if you like, of the commercial before any effects were applied. So different parts are being lit or left in shade quite deliberately. The director is choosing the areas in which he wants the effect to travel and has helped with the creation of the effect by using physical lighting as a starting point. The lighting was achieved by using a mini rig of dado lights, that's DEDO, in case you want to check them out on the internet, and these lights were individually triggered via dimmer switches. Although the idea was to have the talent primarily lit by these specific lights that is travelling around him, it was important to Julian, the director, that the experts didn't appear too ghostly, so some artistic judgment was involved. For example, using some ambient light or some modelling light, and also choosing how far the dado lights were positioned from the expert. Not everything was done scientifically, but rather done with an artistic approach. The lights were given some random flickering, for example, to help sell the idea of these effects having life as they pass around the talent. Obviously, all of this is done in camera before any effects have been applied, so the director needs to have a great idea of timing, how the effect would flow through the piece, right there on set. After the shoot, the rushes were supplied to us on digital tape, as I mentioned before, and then digitised into one of our Avid editing systems. The next step was for one of our editors here to create offline edits for each of the commercials, whilst liaising with Julian and Ed, the producer. And finally, each one was run through one of our Autodesk Smoke suites to create an online edit of the base layer of each commercial. I then brought these clips into After Effects to start work on them. Okay guys, I really hope you found all the background to this job interesting. This stuff really is fundamental to where you are at before you start working on something, before the effects actually, can start to be created. It's really just a kind of a taster of the kind of workflow that surrounds many of the jobs I do, and I'm sure a lot of people do, and without all of this background stuff there would really be far less interesting jobs to work on. However, I can guess you're all keen to move on to the main event, so I would like to move on to the After Effects work itself. Here we are in a cleaned up project inside After Effects. I call it a cleaned up project because all I've basically done is taken everything that you saw here in the first part of the tutorial, and I've just dropped it into a folder called Previous just to clean things up, just so that we're not looking at clutter. The first thing I'm going to do is bring in our edit, which is a series of DPX files, and now there are 250 of those. If we were to take that sequence, drop it onto our create new comp icon, we will end up with a 10-second piece which is 250 frames long. Obviously I'm working in the UK, I'm working at 25 frames a second, 250, 10 seconds. The maths is really easy for us over here. The first thing I want to do with this now is break this up into shots. I find that it's much easier to work on effect shots as individual items, so I'm just going to hit Shift Command D at this point to split the layer. We've now got shot 1 here, which I will hit return, type in shot 001. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-compose that, and I'm going to hit Shift Command and C to pre-compose. Now I always type PC for pre-composed. It just helps me. It's a little naming convention that I use. Go ahead and use it if it's useful for you, and don't if it's not. It doesn't really matter which of these we choose because we haven't done anything with this shot, so there are no attributes to be left or moved. It is what it is. We'll hit OK on that. Okay, so I'm just going to double click this layer now and go into it, and of course we can see now, sorry about this, that a stage we just did was redundant actually. When you pre-compose a layer that you've trimmed down, you actually still end up with the full length layer in your pre-composition. So I'm just going to find the endpoint that we wanted. It was here, wasn't it? I'm going to hit N on my keyboard, and I'm going to hit Control and click, and I am going to trim the comp to the work area. So apologies for that slightly misleading step there. But we now have our shot to length in a pre-composition, which is exactly what we wanted. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to create a little energy ball that rises up from the bottom of frame, rises up along with Akram's hands, is compressed by his fingers, and becomes a fine point, the point at which he connects his fingers here, frame 30. So what we're going to do is Control and click, and we are going to create ourselves a new solid. Now, it doesn't really matter what colour you make this solid, it really doesn't. I'm just going to make it black for now. Just keeps things easy. Hit OK to that. Okay, so I'm going to rename this as strokes, and we are going to get into using 3D stroke. So in our effect controls panel here, I'm going to control click again. I control click a lot in After Effects just to bring up contextual menus. I find it saves a lot of time. Now I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to find my Trapcode 3D stroke option. Now you'll notice that as soon as 3D stroke is applied, the layer becomes transparent. Let's switch Akram off. Let's switch that off so we're not being confused by that at the moment. Now, what I want to do is just draw a nice, fairly simple 3-point stroke. Something like that. Something as simple as that, basically. I'm going to hold down Command, by the way, to alternate my tools here so that I can then pull points around, create the kind of curve that I want. That is, for today, that is absolutely fine. Now, 3D stroke has various options in it, and the ones that we're interested in at the moment are thickness, which is pretty self-explanatory. It just controls the thickness of the line, and feather, which controls the softness of the edges of the line. Let's just zoom in here a bit actually so you can see a little bit clearer what it is I'm talking about. Okay, so with absolutely no softness, you may not be able to see, hopefully you can. You see it sort of looks like it's getting a bit fatter. That's basically feathering going on. Let's increase the thickness actually so you can see. Here we go, yeah, you see that? So you've got the feathering going on there, or you haven't, hard edge. So, I want about 50%. I just want those edges to sort of bleed into the background a little bit, so I find that a little bit of feather really helps to sell that. Now, a thickness of 4 is what I want. Now what I'm going to do is, let's just get this onto fit like this. The beauty of 3D stroke is being able to not only offset a stroke like this, so it draws on from point, the first vertex, which is here, that's the first point I drew, and that's the last vertex, the last point I drew. So it will always animate, from first vertex to last. You can animate that, which is great. But what you can also do with it is manipulate the strokes in a pseudo 3D environment. That's exactly what we're going to do in a moment. What first of all we're going to do is hit taper, hit enable on taper. And what taper does is it literally does it tapers off the edges, the ends rather, I should say. If you just this icon here, this toggle mask and shape path visibility, really useful. Click it. Don't have to see the shape of the mask anymore. You can just see the effect. Really helps when you're looking at finer detail and all the rest of it. Let's zoom in there again. So again, we can wipe that on. Now you, I think, will already get a sense of, oh, okay, something more interesting is happening now. With the taper effect, it suddenly becomes more fluid. Before it was just a static line animating through. Now it has a kind of a life about it, which it didn't have before, and that's just by switching that switch on. So you can see that we're gonna get somewhere pretty quickly with this, and that's what's fantastic about it. Now, I want to open up transform. What we want to do is we want to actually bend this slightly. Now, there we go. Now, if we really push this, you can make some great interesting shapes. We just want to bend it a little bit. We want to bend it, just enough to create some interest here. Okay, so let's dial this up a little bit more actually. Let's create a little bit more interest. Let's create something like, I don't know, let's type in 10. Okay, so we've got a slightly freaked out line there. We want to duplicate this layer 5 more times so that we've got 6 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically hitting Command D to duplicate these layers. Let's create a little bit more space here for us so we can see all of these. Let's isolate this first layer here by hitting our solo layer, our solo icon there. Nothing's happening with this at the moment, so what we want to do is we want to set a keyframe. We want to start our offset to be 0 at 0 frames, and we want to set it to be -100. We want to do about 14 frames of animation and push that offset all the way through. Now, what we will see as we move through is we have animation. Now that's precisely what I wanted. What we also want to do though is add a little bit, because it's just, you can see it's kind of a frozen line I think here. What we want to do then is animate the bend function, the bend transformation. Let's click our stopwatch here. Let's hit U so you can see what's going on with these keyframes. So we've got 2 keyframes here for offset from -100 to 100. We've set our bend to be 10 at the beginning, and at the end we will set it to be, I don't know, let's say 15. See what we get. Let's do that. Let's do more. Let's do more. Let's be brave. Let's go up to sort of 25. Yeah. Now it's beginning to have a little bit of life about it, isn't it? I'm actually going to set that lower at the beginning to be something like 4.4 there. That's fine. By the way, there's no real kind of mathematical reason for any of these figures that I'm using. It's more just what creates nice results. However, what I am noticing is that we are getting, we're not getting much life out of that, are we? Considering our offset, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. Look at that. There you go. That's something to watch for. -100. You cannot go any lower than it being completely at the start of your mask, but you can go beyond the end of the mask. Now, if someone can explain to me at a future time why that is. Maybe it's just a speed thing, perhaps. I don't know. What we actually want to do, of course, is only have it max out at 100. Now we should get a much more fluid. There we go. That's what we want. All right. So let's preview that. Okay, there we go. Lovely. So we want to do that 5 times. So I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to go ahead and set that up 5 more times, and I will see you in just a second. I've actually brought you in slightly earlier than I was going to, because I've realised that I'm doing things here that actually I would quite like to show you and I think would be interesting for you. I haven't just stuck with what I showed you with the first stroke. What I actually started to do to create some interest, let's just solo our first layer here to have a look at where we were. Okay, so we've got this moving. We are animating the offset and we are animating the bend. Now, what I found to be interesting as well is to actually start animating the mask as well. So if we've obviously got our toggle mask and shape path visibility back on, so we can see our mask, and we can see it animating. Very, very subtle little animation there. Again, on the third layer, it's a different shaped mask, obviously, and again, there's just a very subtle animation on it. It's just little things to add life and movement to these. So, I was tweaking these masks, and I realised really, I should be making you aware of what's going on. That's the whole point of this, of course. But at the same time, we've saved a good while there of me going through all of these layers and setting, keyframes and all, creating slightly different masks and all the rest of it. So, we're beginning to get something that's sort of quite interesting, the way these all interact together. It's creating quite a nice feel. This is the last one that I need to do, so I thought I may as well, dip back into it here and show you what I'm doing. This, of course, is at the moment a duplication of our original stroke layer. I've not yet tweaked it. So what I've noticed actually is that the bend, if you bend these things too much, they actually end up right in the center of screen. Let me just solo this so you can see what I mean. This is something to bear in mind when you're bending your 3D strokes. If you crank bend right up, you will end up with what looks a little bit like a tadpole or something, and actually it becomes very, very, very far away indeed from your original sketch there. Now let me sketch. I say sketch. It's actually obviously it's a mask here, but you know what I mean. The line that you've created. So if we take that bend back down, like so, it actually begins to return back to its original form. And I actually do want something closer to this line here. So if we unsolo that, we've got everything back. Now hello, we are beginning to get something quite interesting. What's happening here, of course, is I've actually accidentally keyframed my bend. Let's just move that so it replaces our first one. Let's reduce this back down to say something like 3. So actually we're using the fact that the bend function kind of squishes lines in towards the center of screen as a benefit here, because we want these lines to be kind of contained within a sphere, and so by cranking up the bend a little bit, we're actually pushing these lines into a more central position, kind of keeping them contained in this sphere-like shape, which is precisely what we want. What I want to do with these actually now is I want to offset them all. So I want them all to basically, let's say, come in every sort of, I don't know, 4 frames or something. So what we can do is just literally hit our page down icon, sorry, page down button, 1, 2, 3, 4, hit our layer that we want, and hit our sort of our square open bracket key to push that inline. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again 1, 2, 3, 4, and again 1, 2, 3, 4, and again 1, 2, 3, 4, and for one final time. There we go. Now there we go. We have actually got every line now overlapping, and it's still contained within our original opening shot duration. Apologies if you've just seen the screen jump there slightly. What I've actually done is started the rest of this tutorial on the following day, so I'm trying to continue exactly where I'd left off. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to take our pre-comp shot 001 PC, we want to drop that onto our create new comp icon in order to pre-compose it inside another composition. Let me just move those lines into the center of the screen there for you. And what we want to do is we want to add a bit of pseudo 3D-ness to these lines. Effectively what I want to do is indicate that they're inside a transparent sphere, if you like. Now the simple easy way of doing that is within our effect controls panel, control click, go to distort, find our bulge function, and it brings up this little circle here. And what we want to do is increase the horizontal radius and vertical radius in order to increase the size of the circle, which is in fact the area in which the effect will be applied. We want to increase that to go across all of the lines that we see in our composition. Move our center here. And you can see they're bulging out already, so hopefully you can see it. Let's zoom in a little bit for you. You see how they're basically being bulged by the effect. That's exactly what we want to do. What we want to do is mess around with bulge height a little bit. There we go. So now, do you see they've got, let's just zoom in again for you. Do you see that they've got just a little bit more of an indication of sweeping around a sphere, perhaps? I just think it's subtle. But that's, we're in the business of subtlety, I think. I like that. I think that adds a little something to those lines. You can see, the way this is now curving around. I think that just really helps. But I don't want to stick with just one layer. I want to duplicate that layer, and I want to have a front and a back. So why not rename these front, rename this one back. And one of the reasons why I've used the bulge function, not the spherize function, is bulge can either come towards us or push away from us. The bulge height can go into minus figures. So let's solo our back layer and let's push our bulge height back to say, around about 1.1. And let's just have a quick look at that. So it's basically given us, they've got smaller, they've been pushed, effectively, they've been pushed further back in space in any true, real 3D way, but, they appear to have been pushed back in space. If we add them together, you can see the difference. Yeah, there's kind of got an element of distance now between those, but I don't want them to be exact duplicates. I don't want you to see, effectively, it almost looks like an echo, but in order to make this a little bit different, it's very simple. Just going to open up the scale, put in a minus in front of our 100 there, and there we go. I like that. I think that's got interest to it now. So to add more interest, I'm sure you're keen to move on with getting this composited as soon as possible, and so am I. I appreciate this tutorial is beginning to get onto the fairly lengthy side, so I may speed up just very slightly here. Apologies if I start going a little fast. What I'm going to do is add some colour to this, and the easiest way to do that is to take our shot 001 PC2 and drop it onto a new comp icon again. Okay, so we've got our composition like this. Now what I want to do is, we've got this composition that's actually a full HD composition. These lines exist within a full 1920 1080 frame. They really don't need to. So very quickly I'm going to hit Command R to bring up the rulers, and I'm going to find the points at which the lines reach their most extreme position on the left, the right, the bottom and the top. I'm going to drop a ruler in there just as a guide, like so. So it's around about there. We don't have to be absolutely, pixel perfect here. It's just really just to make sure that when I crop this, which is what I'm about to do, I don't crop any of the action out. It's just for reference. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So we've got approximately, it's approximately a sort of a square shape, isn't it here? In order to crop a composition, really very simple again. We're going to go down to our region of interest icon here, click region of interest, draw out over our rulers that we've just drawn out for ourselves for our reference, and we're going to go up to composition, and we are going to crop our comp to region of interest. Okay, and that is done. There we go. Oh, now actually, you see, that's an error. So let's go back. I obviously didn't go far enough, did I? There we go. So very quickly, I will just do that again. Apologies for that. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's all contained now. That's great. Well, what we want to achieve here is these neon colours, these really bright saturated colours, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to work in 32-bit. Now there isn't enough time in this tutorial to really go into the scope of what 32-bit is, etc., but very simply it allows us to create what are called overbrights, which are oversaturated colours. We're allowed to go effectively beyond white. We can add more red or more blue or more green. Once we've reached what would effectively normally be peak white, we can actually add beyond that. And what happens there is when you start blurring objects or lines or layers that have got overbrights in them, that allows that extra saturation to bleed through. I'm going to demonstrate what I mean very shortly, so if you're not quite with me at the moment, don't worry, it's all going to become very clear, hopefully. So we're obviously at the moment we're working in 8 bits per channel. We want to option click, hold down option or alt, 8, 16, 32, cycle through to 32-bit. We want to create a new solid like so, and we want to create a new color. Now our RGB doesn't behave in the way you'd expect in 8-bit. In 8-bit you'd expect to see it dial up to 255 maximum for red, green and blue. Here you get these crazy numbers like 9.24 and all the rest of it. Effectively, to achieve peak white, all we need to do is type in 1, 1 and 1. Okay, so you can see straight away we're working on very different levels to 8-bit. But as I said, we want to create an overbright. This is effectively our peak white. We want to add more red than anything else. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put 2.5. Okay, so it still looks like white, okay, because it can't show you beyond peak white. But what happens is when we drop let's rename this solid as an overbright solid. When we track matte that, there we go. Now you should see straight away we've got something really interesting happening. We've got peak white in the center, and we've got this kind of red being revealed. Now this is all to do with the softness, the feather that we added to our lines. The way that's kind of petering out is allowing red to come through. The way it's being matted out is allowing some of the red to come through from the overbrights layer. But it gets really, really exciting in just a moment. If we take our shot 001 PC3, which really, I should name these, shouldn't I? Let's call this, excuse me, let's click in here. Let's call this our over bright lines. Okay, lovely, there we go. And let's create another new composition with our over bright lines in it. There they are, looking already rather nice. What I want to do is I want to add a glow to these to really demonstrate to you the kind of exciting colours you can get out of using 32-bit. So I'm going to go down to stylize, I'm going to find glow. Wow, okay, yeah, that is just a glow of 1, right? A radius of 10. Now, I'm sure you guys have all applied a glow before, and you do not get those results out of a glow, do you? With that kind of low setting. If we increase the radius, I mean, look at that. That is just electric, isn't it? You only get that with 32-bit color. Okay, so I'm just doing this in this composition just as a demonstration really for you. Let's actually switch that glow off for now. What we want to do is get into compositing this now. We want to get into the, let's start concluding this part of this tutorial. Open up shot, your first pre-composition, composition rather I should call it really, that we created, this shot 001. Obviously we've got this is where we started building our strokes. We had our acrim layer in the background. Well, this acrim layer is what we now want in a new composition, so you may as well just duplicate that up again, and let's rename this, let's rename this Composites 001. Okay. What we actually want to do is just take this layer through to our Composite 001. Just what I did was copy and paste it from here. This layer is now redundant. Get rid of it. Okay, what we want to do now, let's bin this layer window here, by the way. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so now we want to composite our exciting lines into our acrim shot. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got our over bright lines. We want to drop them into our acrim shot. There we go. Oh, look at that. Right, that's gonna look great, isn't it? Let's scale them down slightly. Okay, and let's start compositing. So what we want to do is basically animate these from out of shot. We want to follow his hands up here until he pinches it together, and it will become nothing. It just becomes like a tiny infinitesimal ball of energy. So very simply, let's move our layer off. Let's create a pivot position, create a keyframe, and I'm not going to track anything here, not for the purposes of what we're doing today. I'm just going to animate this by hand. I mean, actually, look how much we're going to get away with this anyway. It's not exactly the hardest piece of animation I've ever had to do. But what I'd want to do, of course, is scale this as well simultaneously. So at this point, we really want our scale to be pretty much at 0. Let's make it 0, so it's just pinched between his fingers. Okay, and here we want this to be at 100%. Well, not 100%. Let's scale that up. It doesn't need to be that big, does it? We were around about sort of 40% or so, weren't we? I believe. And I think we want to keep that. Actually, we don't. We want to keep it just so that it's just, there we go, just being kept within his hands, and then it gets pinched down to nothing. Let's just move that up there as well. Okay, so it moves up with his hands. Maybe it just needs to be slightly higher at this point. Maybe about there. Maybe again here, it just needs to move up slightly. I kind of want it to be, I want there to be a relationship between our lines and his fingers here. Alright, okay. I think that's going to do us, isn't it, for animation tips? Obviously we could sit and tweak it, but yeah, I'm conscious again of the duration of this tutorial, so I think that's looking really nice. Now, of course, you'll notice it's going over his finger here. Come the real thing, we would mask that finger back over top of it in order to, to composite it back in order to make it believable that that's actually, behind his hand here. What we want to do is apply our lovely glow. So it's already sat there at the top because we just looked at it, didn't we? Let's increase our radius slightly. Let's take the intensity right down. Yeah, this is where you start getting some really nice, subtle. Let's zoom in there for you. Let's make sure we're at full resolution for you here as well. Okay, we're at 200%, which is why it's slightly steppy. You can see it just creates a really lovely glow there. But I actually wanted to create 3 versions of this layer in order to get a stronger glow going on. We're into the realms of taste now. How far you want to push this as a designer, what the look is you're trying to achieve, what your client wants. Now, in this instance, what I actually did, and this is something that is quite interesting, when you're working in 32-bit color, you can restrict which layers are working in 32-bit, and the way in which you can do that is by applying an effect which actually doesn't work in 32-bit. So, for example, if we were to apply a fill, which is only an 8-bit effect, you have got here an exclamation mark which indicates that effect is not working in the bits per channel mode that you've got here, which is obviously our 32 bits. So what you can actually do with this, if we were to say, for example, put a little bit of a pinkish fill into that layer, is you can start affecting the strength of the glows, the way in which these layers are working together, and so you can create a slightly more subtle effect sometimes, whilst also maintaining some of this really nice 32-bit glow. It's kind of being able to combine these layers is really useful to create the exact effect that you want. I'm not going to get into layering this up anymore or affecting this much more, because I think we've kind of really covered all that, and I think it'd be interesting now to have a look at how one of the other shots was put together. You can effectively see where we're at with this shot and how I got to the final thing, I think, from what we've covered so far. So that's looking good. So if we jump across to another composition, if I was to open up our previous folder here, let's jump into our master composition here. Let's find shot 2. Let's just drag this over so you can see what's going on. So let's jump across to shot 2 here. Let's open this up. Okay, so really to round things up here, I just wanted to go through a little bit of how this shot was made. I have a top layer here in which I have rotoscoped out his fingers, his arm, his hand, and I've been pretty logical about it. I've named all of our layers here appropriately, or sorry, I should say all of our masks here. And just a very quick thing about rotoscoping: if you are doing something that moves a lot over time, which there are great differences on a frame-to-frame basis, which there are in something like this, where obviously this hand is moving dramatically. It sometimes, well, it's almost more often than not, it pays to rotoscope out specific areas. Like, for example, I have here the main part of his hand, his little finger, his ring finger, middle finger, and that way you can concentrate on a specific area. It's easier to deal with that rather than having one mask that tries to describe everything. You guys might already be aware of that, but it's just a useful tip if you're not, to approach rotoscoping in a way that just makes life more easy for you. So again, it's a layered up version of these strokes, and all I did, just to round this section up, all I did here was I just had an open mask, endpoint here, which I animated over time. Let me just preview this for you. Okay, so that's previewed that now. Let me just open this up a little bit so you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, that's better. So what we actually have here is one animated stroke, which is an open path, on which I then choose to animate the offset of the 3D stroke at the appropriate time. And then I actually just have 2 static masks, which is this one drawing around here, and this one looping around here that follows the motion of his hand. Now, of course, they don't look static because the 3D stroke's animating across them, but it's just to show you just how simple that setup is. And with the rotoscoping again with the 32-bit color, you actually, and the animation, of course, of the stroke itself and of this one mask, it really feels, like a very dynamic little bit of animation when actually not that much is going on under the hood, really. So yeah, if you wanted to have a quick look at this, we could just get in here, and there you go. It's as simple as that. We just have this stroke here, which I animate up, and then the offset here only actually kicks in here, frame 13, and just animates it out as that mask kind of turns into a loop. And then these two, as you can see, are static. The masks themselves don't actually move at all. So that's what's going on there. And I mean, when you look at this is why I wanted to show you this. When you look at this matte run, effectively, of these strokes, you can see how simple that is in terms of how it's been put together. Obviously, it looks far more dramatic, far more exciting than the original matte run would have you believe. So I think, in conclusion, guys, I'm going to wrap it up now. I think we've covered everything that then led to me being able to create all the rest of this commercial. If we just preview this again so we can see. So we've built shot 1, we had a look at shot 2, but you can now see how shot 3, 4, 5, etc., how these would have all been built in exactly the same way. I mean, the end section there is actually using Trapcode form to create that wipe across there, which I think we're running out of time on this tutorial now, so I won't go into that. Maybe we can look at form some other time. So, in conclusion, the effects that we've used here are appropriate to the concept. They tell a story. We start with that little ball of energy squeezed into a single point, and then over the course of a 10-second commercial it comes alive as those streams of light which represent the kinetic energy released by the dancer's movements. I chose to use 3D stroke because it's such a quick effect to use. It's really easy to modify it. It's the obvious choice to create these kind of fluid animations. Well, I hope this has been interesting for you guys. I hope it's given you an insight into some ways of working, along with some of the decision making early on in the process and some of the hard work that comes from all directions before it even comes anywhere near the post-production side of things. So I've really enjoyed making this tutorial, and I hope to do more soon. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Once again, my name is Owen Street, and I'm very proud to be making this tutorial on behalf of Red Giant. Thank you very much. Take care. See you soon.
Thanks, Owen. Great stuff. We hope to have you back again soon to share more of your techniques. As I mentioned earlier, Owen is a motion graphics artist, compositor, and designer, and he works at a company called 422 based in Manchester, England. You can find them at 422.tv. Also, you can see more of Owen's work at both www.behance.net/Owen Street and at www.vimeo.com/Owen Street. Don't forget, you can download a free trial version of Trapcode 3D Stroke and the entire Trapcode suite at redgiantsoftware.com. And you can get tons of free presets for Red Giant plugins at redgiantpeople.com. Finally, I want to mention that if you're looking to keep up with what we're doing at Red Giant, whether it's a tutorial, a contest, a product release, or whatever, just follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and on our blog. Once again, I'm Aaron Rabinowitz for Red Giant TV. I'll see you next time.